this is Jess from Make and Do Crew, and this tutorial is going to cover everything you need to know to make my Cleo Fedora hat pattern or the Tate Rancher hat pattern, both of which you can find for free on makeanddocrew.com, and you can also follow the link right below this video. While both patterns use different yarn and vary a little in stitch counts, the concepts to make them are the same, and that's what we're going to be covering in this video. So for both the Tate and the Cleo, we're going to get started with a magic loop, and this is sometimes also called a magic circle. And if you're unfamiliar with the concept, just do a quick search and watch a more detailed tutorial on the specific skill. Once we have that magic loop, we're going to place 6 single crochet in the loop. This pattern is worked in a spiral, which means we're not going to chain 1 at the beginning of each round, and we're not going to join each round as it's completed. We're just going to work exactly as it sounds, spiraling out from the center. It's important to know that we're working our stitches intentionally tight in this pattern to create a nice stiff fabric. When you have 6 single crochet in that loop, then you've officially finished round 1. For round 2, we're going to work into the first single crochet, and this is how we'll begin that spiral I was referring to. We need to place 2 single crochet in each of our 6 stitches. So at the end of this round, we should have 12 single crochet. When you're working in a spiral, it's really important to place a stitch marker in the first stitch of a round and then move it up into the first stitch of each subsequent round, because this helps you keep track of where one round stops and a new one begins. In round 3, we're going to place 2 single crochet in the first stitch and then work 1 stitch with a regular single crochet. Then we'll place 2 single crochet in the next stitch and then work a regular single crochet in the next. You'll notice as you work this hat top that the number of stitches between the increases, those 2 single crochets, will go up by 1 stitch per round. So if in round 3 we have 1 stitch between the double single crochet, in round 4 we'll have 2 stitches between those increases. And after our circle gets a little bigger, we'll start keeping track of these increases with stitch markers so we don't have to count as much. After continuing this up to round 7, it's really important to measure your circle to make sure your gauge is on track. Meeting the pattern gauge here means that your hat is going to fit as expected, so do not skip this step. Both the Cleo and the Tate include a measurement for how large your little circle should be at this point to make sure you're on gauge. And once you've checked that, you're ready to cruise on for several more rounds, increasing 6 times each round as we've been doing. The number of rounds you work will depend on which pattern you're making and what size you're making it in. We're going to put a marker in the first single crochet of every increase so that we don't have to count while we're working. Just take note of what color stitch marker is marking your first stitch so that you know where the actual round ends. And once you finish that, go ahead and measure your circle once more to make sure it's tracking with the measurement listed in the free written pattern. Next, we're going to move on to the hat bucket section, which is very easy because it's just single crochet worked without increasing around and around and around. So you'll place 1 single crochet in each stitch and complete the number of rounds the pattern prescribes for your size. A couple of things are important here. It can be really helpful to place a stitch marker in the first round of the bucket section so that as you're counting the rounds you've completed, you don't have to count all the hat top rounds too. You just count from the marker instead. Additionally, make sure to keep your stitch marker that you've had in the first stitch and continue to move it up to the first stitch of each round as you work. Once you've completed your bucket rounds of working even, some sizes have 1 round of 6 increases, just like we worked before. So if that's your size, you'll just work 2 single crochet in your first stitch, and then 1 single crochet per stitch for the number of stitches listed in the pattern, and then 2 single crochet in the next stitch, and you'll just repeat that around. Again, this is dependent on the size hat that you're making. Our last section of the pattern is obviously the brim, and this part uses 2 skills we've already practiced a lot: increasing and working even. Our first brim round for all sizes is going to include 12 increases. So just like before, we're going to work 2 single crochet into the first stitch, place our marker there, and then place 1 single crochet in each stitch for the appropriate number of stitches before we work another 2 single crochet. You'll continue in the same way for the entire round, placing 2 single crochet in 1 stitch to increase, and then putting 1 single crochet in each stitch for a certain number of stitches. Just like we did on the bucket, you'll want to place 1 stitch marker in your first brim round so that you know very clearly where to count the brim rounds from. For the brim, each increase round alternates with a round of working even. Alternating like this helps disguise the increases so that they're less noticeable in the brim. So now we're just going to repeat these 2 rounds, the increase round and then the working even round, several more times. And just like with the hat top, each increase round will include 1 more single crochet stitch between the individual increases. As long as your markers are kept in place though, this isn't really something you have to count dutifully. I just like to point out how the pattern works so you can troubleshoot if you realize something's gone wrong. At this point, you'll want to do a quick steam blocking of your hat to get the brim as smooth as possible. So just hold a steamer or an iron with a steam setting over the hat while you smooth out the brim, making sure you don't actually touch the steamer or iron to the yarn because that could cause it to melt. In both the Tate and the Clio, we use an inexpensive wire rope to stiffen the brim and give it more structure. This is called galvanized wire rope, and it's available at stores like Home Depot and Lowe's for under 30 cents a foot. To add your wire rope, you're simply going to be crocheting over it as you complete a round of working even. And it can feel a little clunky at first because the wire is flapping around, but once you've crocheted a few stitches over it, it's easy to hold in place while you work. Once you're approaching the last few inches of this round, you'll want to lay your hat flat and smooth out the brim so that you have the right amount of wire circling the hat. Then use wire clippers to snip off your excess wire, leaving a couple inches to overlap. I haven't had this problem, but I've heard from a few crocheters that their wire has poked out from their hat brim eventually. So my suggestion is to use some sort of thin tape that's similar color to your yarn to tape the wire ends down. I'm using masking tape here, but you could also use a small amount of electrical tape or duct tape, depending on how often you think you'll wash your hat. The Clio Fedora finishes with 1 extra round of reverse single crochet, and I have a separate video tutorial showing that. So go ahead and watch that tutorial for step-by-step instructions on finishing up your Clio. For the Tate though, we're done after we get this wire in, so I'm just slip stitching to the first stitch of this round and then fastening off so I can weave in this end. And that is all there is to crocheting your own Fedora style hat. If you found this video helpful, I'd love it if you gave it a good old thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. You can find lots more free crochet patterns and tutorials just like this on my site, makeanddocrew.com. Thanks for watching and happy crocheting!